Okay. So take a seat on your bolster with your feet towards roll, the blanket roll, and have your knees pointed up and roll your shoulders and finding that the rolling pattern of the shoulder bones, right, can be kind of crackly in the back. It could be your sound is coming from the back of your body versus the shoulder peak. You might notice when you roll your shoulders that you can feel your brain centered up. So I want you to find kind of your spine root down into your tailbone. Get the shoulders to motion until there's a little bit of tiredness from about 10 to 15 circular rolls through the shoulders. Now, as you center your hands to help slide you to lower on your back, you want to sit on the block, and then you guide your spine through this curved shape so that as you lower down, this is a little bit of a work in progress sometimes for all of us to get our legs stretched down on the blanket the right way. So I don't mind having a spot where I feel like I'm touching to the wall, but I do want you to spend energy getting yourself sorted out so that before you get any sand on you, you feel like the body is lifted up a bit, and maybe your blanket at the base, you have to kind of fuss with that until your heels are more or less floating up. I don't want them to be pushed to the floor. So regardless of what might be in front of your feet, let it be very specific that you feel your heels lifted, even if your toes touch towards something, that lower base of the bone structure is slightly elevated all the way through the front line of the body. There's a light bit of openness, and the rib cage, the thoracic chamber, is flowing out horizontally. So here's where I have to kind of decide, do I want my blanket a little higher or do I feel comfortable with it this low? So be sure that if you have your hair kind of pushed up with anything, you want to be able to flatten that down so that all of your skull is supported, but it's actually also stretching through your neck. And then take a sandbag and place that so it goes across the front realm of your hip bones. And when that position of the sand, I would keep it pretty just pure and simple with how much sand you use. Let it lay to that space, and feeling now that we're not using the belt on the legs this week for this pose, that you have an ability to let the legs have a little more stance of width. A tiny bit more might change the effect in your back muscles, which brings them into kind of a place of relaxation. Open out the arms, let the shoulders go heavy back to the floor, and enter the pose as you come into it with a bit of curiosity for the breathing style your practice begins with. So checking in, not necessarily to your state of mind or your emphasis in your practice, right? It's about right now the breathing standards. So as you in-breath, let the abdomen expand. And as you out-breath, feel the diaphragm actually ascends up towards the heart. Experiencing the energy of breathing, whole body. And it can be kind of a perplexing pose. It's sort of a silly pose in some way, how we center ourselves on the back, kind of belly up, right? And we also have this lifted core body. So It's interesting that it's a pose to set the body into repair mode. And it can be a pretty cozy position once you have enough proppage to balance your bones and lift up the spine roots. So feature your breathing. Inhale for a count of 4 to 5. And exhale for 5 to 6. Good. Keep that centering perspective. Relaxing the heart. Now, as we feel the open quality of the arms, and that clearly demonstrates movement in the rib cage. So intercostals in motion, right? The rib cage is in motion with the breath. So scan the sensation area of the sand and what's below the sand or what's beneath. And that area we're going to shift fairly soon. So then you'll be all on bolster. Okay, and so this maneuver takes a little bit of commitment in care for your body, kind of alignment, assignment, right? You want it to be directly supported. So right now there is a little bit of mystery about, is this enough support for my back musculature? So give it a few more moments before we completely shift our legs to lifting straight up. I want you to kind of enjoy that satisfaction of this whole front layer of the legs lengthening, but also consider that this kind of still is putting the legs at a lower base. And then, you know, they tend to fill up with retention, right? Because they're stood on and they're at the base of you. So they're going to get all that collection of matter. So what we're doing in inversion is to reverse that gravitational flow. So in the next few moments, I want you to go at your own pace to maneuver this, but kind of notice and relate that this is a back bend here, right? We have the ribs lifted, the arms have opened the ribs. So when you move the sand away, you're simply going to slide the feet, walk them in towards your center, and position them as if this is your bridge pose of choice, right? You do not have to push your hips up. This is all supported bridge. It's doing all the work for you. It's a small bridge compared to what you might be able to access, but feel if you were accepting this as your full expression, and just kind of be with that. I know it's lesser than your fullness, but accepting that is important, I think, before you kind of push into your feet in effort. So kind of notice that the front lane of travel through the organs is open, okay? And now what we'll do is we're gonna make sure the feet are shifted in towards your seat. So you really have a fold in your knees and your hip crease. And then just simply tilt over to one side so that you can move your block away. You can put it next to your bolster. And then as you push down into your feet to lift your hips up towards the ceiling, you're gonna just reach for the sides of your bolster. If you got little handles on the bolster, those are kind of nice to have. And then push the bolster down, maybe a few inches at the most. It's up to you though. You're gonna push the bolster down, nudge it down so as far as you know it's not swerving, right? It's across the mat perfectly. And then you can feel where your rear is in connection to the bolster's edge. You want to be right at the edge. So it's not just your tailbone at the edge, but you can notice that your rear flesh is right at that other edge of the bolster. And then move the right knee in, move the left knee And the in is important that they squeeze in. And then once you're here in this knee bending axis, I want you to flow the arms open. Make sure that you have a block near the sides of your bolster on both sides. Yeah, the blocks are kind of high up. This will make it a little bit easier, but I'm going to set the blocks a little bit farther out than I'm used to and just kind of play this and see how this flows. So my knees are going to shift a little bit away from my ribs, and my work right now is in going side to side. And I'm touching down on the blocks. So they're kind of my support, right? I've got these little bumper blocks. Okay, so you're playing a kind of bumper car kind of play right now, but you're touching down to the blocks and you're smoothing out the lower back sheath, the kidney area, since it's probably a little higher than just your tailbone that you're on the bolster with. And then this will be a good time to decide, well, maybe you want the bolster lower. Maybe it feels just fine and it's a little bit of a workout for your core to keep it this high in your back. But if I center myself, the bolster feels like it gives me a little bit of a lift. It's a little bit of a back bend. So give the spine this time to kind of loosen up and get any of those kind of frayed edges in your back that are gripping from the last pose to loosen. And then as you move over to right side, so we're similar, knees over towards the right, maybe your block is under the right leg, then get a feel that these knees, or actually your whole experience from your left hip over to the knees is kind of in this scooping shape, right? It's not like straight across angle, it's scooping, right? So your stomach muscles can actually relax here. Your belly is not trying to pull in and get as tone as possible. It's moving with the shape. And that might be important for you. Let the left arm stretch open. You could add sand to this one on the outer left leg. We will do one of those poses later on, so you're not going to miss out on the opportunity. But just kind of notice where your breath moves when you're in a super twister. It's kind of a super twist through the rib corral. And I'm trying to keep my left shoulder down. That's why the arm goes out. The top leg could kind of kick around. If you got space over there, you could swing that leg out and try to stretch a little further. Nothing wrong with simple. Okay, and then the weight is in your right pocket, right? If you have a pant pocket, that's where your weight is. And then can you let your hands press down and then squeeze the heels towards the buttocks, and then you come back center. So you want to keep that compact shape to come up. So the heels push in towards your rear. And now go to the other side. And if in between you need to stop and reset, and some of us might decide to, in fact, reset, like you put your body a little bit farther to the right side of the bolster, and then you move your knees to the left. So some of us might want to have more bolster under us for the crossover. So the heels move away from the rear, and the knees are slanting to the left. Now, one side, the top leg may be farther across to the other knee, and it might be different depending on your hip tension. So noticing, hip tensions as we are getting started here. And let your arms stretch open on the right. If you feel comfortable to let your head roll to the right side. And delivering a slow breath. And exhale completely. Now, as your feet draw back towards your seat, knees in that tucked position, it's really tucking. The knees have to tuck in so that when you start to move your knees to point up, you are really accessing a lot of this core it kind of buckles in a little bit to bring it back to a safe center. And then you might as well let your feet come down and kind of reorient your back of your pelvis on the bolster and get situated so that when we bring our knees back up, we get a sandbag or any kind of weight that you might have. And as you place that to your center, you'll feel your head supported on the blanket continuing. Make sure that that is accessed all the way to the base of your neck. And add your sand to the feet. So you're tucking your knees in. And this tuck position is what's kind of releasing the back. So when we consider a restorative session, we're working on the body is in repair mode. This is like a class that you're working on inner repair work. So as we lift up that sand, we've got to lift sandbags to do the repairing. You might feel like the legs now can take a stand, right? At this point, they're reversing the flow of gravity. The feet simply take the sand, so they'll flex without any instruction. And then relax your eyes so there's no strain at looking around. You can kind of commit to studying that cycle of circulation. That can be kind of a fun study. Arms out in cactus. So kind of studying that cycle of breath circulation. The arms might be closer than they've been to towards your head than they were all the way from the beginning of class. So bending the elbows and then letting the ribs move with both the in and the out breath. You know, feeling that dose of movement, especially in the lower abdomen or any abdominal zone, you can experiment with the pull, the ebb and flow of the breath. And behind that breath in the front is the roots of the spine. And they're turned a little bit upside down. I mean, your inner body wouldn't know anything different. It's your brain that's going to interpret that, I suppose. So maybe we could toss those interpretations out and just exist within these pose frames. Because none of them are really alien to the inner environment. It just is, isn't it? So the tailbone does have a sense of relaxing here. Right, it's not trying to push any direction, but you have pushed it a little bit with the bolster. So if you're competent in finding this is okay in your back, it is a step, you know, into an intermediate world. If you can stay with this steady with your bolster for quite a bit of time and feel like your core organs are comfortable with this workout, right? This toning and changing the flow of gravity into that area. So reversing the downward pull. You know, if the feet tilt a little side to side, just enjoy that they can be a little different from pose to pose. Now, can you bring the hands together, interlacing, and then turn the hands inside out, stretch them either towards the ceiling or overhead, either one is fine. But get a feel when you do move the arms back that the armpit chest is now nicely centered. It's not stretching deeply, but for some of us, we might feel parts of the arms giving some length and space. Okay, well done. So get a feel when the knees are bending. We're going to stay inverted, but we're going to take a kind of a load off of the feet. So when you reach up to your sand to remove, I want you to get your belt, and it's buckled up. Your feet are probably already experiencing a little tingliness. And so you want to feel in the immediate future here, get your belt up to your feet, and then your feet to push the belt out. So you're using the whole loop to move your feet outwards. And then that kind of sensation, the feet might fizzle out a little bit, that tingly. But when the feet are positioned in a wide stance, yeah, kind of bring your arms to feel where the connection is in the back muscle. So let's get a block, and we'll, if your feet are comfortable like this, if they're kind of shaky and wavering around, you'll probably need to bring attention there before you add things. But you might need the belt to be smaller looped. You might need to bend the knees. So take the time to get that feeling secure for you. It shouldn't feel like there's any knee kind of rubble going on. Okay, it should feel like that knee rubble is just supported. It's in repair. Okay. All right. So, and it's turning the flow of circulation in the knees upside down. That's another thing. We're not putting the weight the way that we do when we stand into our knees. So when I hold onto the block, I bring my arms towards the ceiling. So you have to have some, at least, attention to hold the block. You can't sleep on this one. So holding onto the wide block, and then feel if you can reach slowly over towards the back. And maybe you never get to touch the floor with the direction, but you'll feel your feet stay about the same. They may try to go with you, but pushing into the block. And then feeling when it becomes a weight, right? It was not such a weight when the hands were towards the ceiling, but as you go back, you have to kind of find your arm equipment to get a little bit toned to hold that. Now, I want you to work on the lungs, right? I like to work on organs a lot, and versus being, superficial focused. So when I bring the block back up towards the ceiling, inhale, and then exhale, block goes back over, maybe halfway, maybe whatever I consider all the way to the ground. And then inhale back towards the ceiling. Belly full, and belly descends towards the floor when you go back. But what really is happening right in the core is the diaphragm ascends, right, when you bring your arms back over. Although you may think in your mind it descends, it goes towards the heart. So take just a couple more with breath regulations. That's what we're doing, is regulating that lung force. You signed up today for a repair class, I guess, inner repairs. And then as we move the block back, center and down, it could actually be anywhere you want your block. But as you are pushed out with your feet, I want you to bend through your knees and then get a hold of the belt and slide the feet together. And then once the feet are in touching mode, slip the left foot out and lower it down towards the blanket. Hold onto the belt together with the left hand and cross that right leg to the left. Yeah, and try to keep the leg straight across from the hip. So no letting it slide downstream right now. Just go straight across. Yeah, your left leg is on vacation. It doesn't have to do anything for a few moments. Yeah, but get a feel for the right leg, coordinating the pulse of circulation in the hip. That can be kind of fun. It's just coordinating that pulse. Doesn't mean that you're pulsing the leg, right? There is a vibrant quality to the sensation that comes out of the shape. Now, can you let the leg be pretty much straight? It might have a micro bend, but it's straightish as you move the leg up. It's resistance. And then take the hands both with the belt and reach up with the left foot. Take the right leg out, change sides, and cross the left leg to the right. Yeah, the sequence is fairly different, right? How we're kind of flowing through. They're all recognizable units of movement, but it is taking the circulation in a different pattern for repair. So if it seems kind of elementary, the directions we're going with the joints, then just kind of see if you can back off from trying to do too much and just find that your leg is slanting to the right. If it tries to push downstream to get more in the IT band, see if you can go straight across. You could bend the knee a little bit, of course. Okay, and then get that feel of that reach through the heel feel. Good, and then as you soften a little bit through that left knee, you'll push the heel straight up towards the sky. And then easy, we just take the belt off the foot. We bring the knees back to that touch position. And what I'm going to have us try to explore is getting from our touch position, and we're going to roll to get into side sage. So maybe having a visualization in your mind of side sage. Okay, you kind of know we roll, we get our side to stretch. So, but getting from this position to that could be a little different. But your whole rib section has been it's been elevated. So the condition is improving that circulation there. So we'll try to get into side sage after this today, just to see how this goes. So rock the knees side to side, just to see how it goes. Maybe it's in a book or something. And then when we roll to any side you want to go to what side your shoulder feels best to go as well. Find that place. And then let the other shoulder roll with it. And then you're going to come around and then slide down towards your feet, okay, towards your blanket. Lift up to get your blanket from the base. Take it overhead. And then start to balance your bones on the side. So you might as well come on up kind of in a moment and just get a feel for being on this left hip. And then get your blankets to a level of lift. So, you know, I kind of like the blankets like this sometimes. They're not super different than if I have it across horizontal. So I'm just going to change it up from the last time I practiced, basically. So you can have your blankets in a double stack is the key. That's the key. Stack them up. Okay, then we lean into it. Now, if you have a rolled up bolster, a bolster ball, you probably use that instead of this. If you have a circular one. Now, if I have a block overhead, okay, I got a ball on the inside of my right leg. I got plenty of space at the foot of my mat. And then as I add my sand, I'm going to get that on beginning as I take this kind of contour into the bolster. So lean. And then the right arm can either be kind of purposeful to flow over towards the block, or you might feel on the way there that you stop and you feel the rib cage, and you got, 24, I mean, you got 12 sets of ribs. So instead of getting too specific or cognitive about what you're emphasizing, explore just the human condition of breathing in a shape. Are you? I mean, on the back, I think we're getting to understand how to breathe on our back. It does take time. You're not a beginner with that, but when you get on your side, to truly get the costals to rise and fall, which could be expanding and relaxing. you can take a little bit of relaxation. So the upper arm could go to the block. You might not like it to overhead. It could be resting on the bolster. And simply sense, is your head supported enough? Do you need the blanket a little higher? And in this direction versus when you're on your back with your head back, you might want to have enough support under your head, because this is not going to help my postural pattern to do less rounding in my back. If I'm on my side and my head is tilted too far down, it won't be useful. So I would encourage you to have plenty of support. You don't want your head tilted up so then you're cranking your neck and going the opposite of length through your spine, but support yourself. Okay, it's a supported class. And then come into the shape for a few moments here. Yeah, away from how it looks to where it feels. So maybe closing your eyes is incredibly important on this. There's zero comparison. It's about how the side feels in response to the breath. And then maybe you get into a still position, relatively still with the breathing. So inhale, slow. Exhale, center. Now this right side has this experience of openness, and the openness might be all above your hip bone, and it might not be a lot under that. So this might be one before you come out of it to take the time to kind of feel the whole structural possibility of this shape. So you might move your sand away and then kind of feel it with awareness of your knee, right? You don't want to be pushing and poking the knee around and then all of a sudden it's painful. So you want to feel that your back is arched, your bolster is really holding you up. So you're not trying to push up off the bolster yet. And just get a feel from this hip bone down through the leg parts. The tissue that's right at the peak of the femur, right, is usually what, stiffens up because of sitting, right? So we're going to be sitting in a moment, so we'll get some perspective on seated. But I want you to get a feel for the left knee close to the bolster, so it really is tucked up to the bolster. And that right hip bone, the frontal hip, the anterior part is reaching, okay, back to the front leg. So one thing we can do is Baddha Konasana. So I think what we'll do is it's going to be seated. So when we come around to moving up to sitting, take a seat. Well, first things first, let's get our blanket from behind you. Kind of, if it's rolled up, you're going to push them next to your bolster, get your blocks away from behind you, and then come up to sit in Baddha Konasana. So your feet together, your knees are open. And it could be your feet are farther in front, it could be closer. This whole front kind of hip sheath, this area is still collectively in that open space for the last pose. So I want you to work with letting your knees kind of drop open. Now, they may not touch the floor. I mean, mine aren't going anywhere from here. They're height with the bolster, proportional. So my work here is on moving my hands to my legs and not trying to enforce that position of moving down, but actually kind of the opposite, letting them flow out from their current, because the spine root is now the pelvis, right? Feel that support. And then as you reach the right leg out, open. Now, open is probably the better version, but out is true. So I move the right leg out, and I'm going to keep my left foot about where I started. I'm going to try to stay with that and see if I can avoid pulling it to the right leg. That's the tendency. So reposition your seat so you're not kind of rounding, right? So you might have to push down to your bolster and position your sitting bones, right? Because they're not tucking right now. You're trying to sit up. And then get maybe something under your left knee. It could be a ball, it could be a block. You know, the ball is really nice for it, I think, but the block works good too. Okay. So it's a little more of an open stance with your foot right now, your left foot. Try to be with the awkward. It's okay. Feels like it's not jammed into the other leg. And then get a belt and make sure that you got a little bit of a loop. Doesn't have to be this big one, but it works out sometimes. And then slide it under your right foot, bending your knee if you need to scoop it up, and take that belt behind you. Now, I want you to hold the belt with the left hand behind you, not to try to push the left hand behind you, like to reach it open. I want you to just clutch onto it so it's supported. Now, this kind of keeps the back rotating. It keeps the ribs rotating, not the back. So I turn and I hold onto the belt with my right hand down towards the right leg. And I want you to bend at that right elbow. I'm assuming you have to bend. And you'll lean into the right leg. Okay. So now I'm going to start walking my left hand. Well, I'm going to creep with my left hand. Doesn't really walk. It creeps around the corner to my closer downwards down the right leg. So it's around my right hip now. It's not on the leg, it's on the hip, the back of the pelvis. So pull a bit with that right hand and see if you can tilt. Now your head could turn so you're turning down towards the leg. You could turn up. This is taught. This isn't like an inaccurate version. You know, and for most of us, turning down will probably feel more comfortable for the neck. So feel that leaning position. Now, can your right leg move out farther? Open, that's correct. You might try that, but we're on the side of ease for your back muscles. So that could tighten the back for some of us. Yeah, so think about as you lean into that right leg, the ribs turn open, and the breath relaxes. So that breath continuously soothing. Yeah, just give it the time. It's not a huge heap of time to do the soothing work, but if you can regenerate slowly in some of the shapes, using the time for self-care. Okay, so when I pull a little bit with that right hand, I feel the back movement. Okay, so now when you come up, and we are going to shift, so we'll bring our right hand to the left knee. Now I'm keeping this really elementary with the left shoulder today, so I'm not teaching let's pull the arm back. It's all basic. So as you hold on to that left knee, you're going to turn the waistline and then see if you can correct your spine movement. So you're spiraling through the spine staircase up to the sky and feel that rotation through the body, almost like it's not tightening the spine. It's like a corkscrew. It really is going up, up, up. And then your head just turns gently, not too much, even lesser than you think. Closing your eyes. Breathing at the lower belly, lower ribs. Okay. So let go of the belt. And then as you unwind and turn forward, we're going to slide that foot out of the belt and cross the right leg. Now this is like this very awkward pattern at the moment. So I want you to move the ball or block away from under the left leg. And then slide that left foot in closer to tuck the foot under the right leg. Okay, so as the left thigh moves down, I put the sand a little higher up on the leg branch. Now I could take my next twist with my foot on the floor, or I could, well, my foot's gonna be on the floor, either version, I guess. my foot could be forward, right? So this is easier on my knee joint. But I also could take that right leg and point the knee up, but then I need a hand to get my leg across. So you would take your hand across your right leg over the left, and you're using the leg branches, you know, to be pretty broad to open up the back. So I don't want this to be, you know, try to smush everything in smaller blocks. I want to keep it broad so it's a bit challenging. It's a tad tough, you know, for the hip. So now as you twist to the right, you're going to rotate to the ribs. And then as you lift up at the heart, you can hold on to that right leg. You can reach your left arm across, hook the elbow a bit, and twist. So belly likely feels a little bit of squeezing. And in breath, filter the air through the nose, hydrate, and exhale, letting go. Turning out. It doesn't mean that you have to get a deeper twist. It might be more centered twist on your exhale. You know, we're trying to get a good full practice. So even if we don't get as many poses in, we're trying to get our poses well, experience and soak it in. So now as you unwind, we're going to take our right leg back behind us, the top thigh. So I want you to get a feel for coming back center first before you kind of fling the legs around. And use the 2 blankets today on this one. I mean, it is going to make a little more cozy, but we can have cozy. So I'm going to move my blocks to the front. And then as I come back, I move my sand away, take the right thigh back. So you're in a pigeon pose with the left knee open, the right foot toes back. Now, if pigeon is a challenge with your leg in this support of the bolster, and it still is a challenge, then you might add a towel under your left buttock to support and create a little bit more kind of comprehensive symmetry right in your back. So if you're a little cattywampus, like your right hip is starting to pop up a bit, your right side, even the hip bone that's straight down, is not able to stay moving down, then that would mean you need something more under your left seat. So as you position in center and feel that flooding of the left hip, and it's like it floods the hip flood. Right leg is in more of a kind of release mode, and your head might tilt down. So let the neck relax, let the weight of your head go forward. If you're not comfortable with this tilt of your neck, okay, you could do a couple options for your head. Some people might want to not have any blocks, but bring their hands down and make a pillow with the hands. Hand pillow, and put your forehead there. It's a pretty dense stretch though if I lower all the way down. But even if your chest doesn't make it completely down, your brain will probably have enough weight to touch down. Okay, now as your body positioning starts to flow into the arms, we'll bring our hands open under the shoulders, try to stretch out through your fingers. And then as you lift up, you'll feel that consistent motion from the arm position into the spine strength. So this is strength work for the back. So when I push back, if it feels like it's a hardship on your wrist and it's not all back or arms, then when you come back, you might have to shift back to your elbows. So it's not going to be painful on the wrist. So everyone will have their positional challenge likely, but toes under right foot, and then tilt your body weight. So there's positioning into the hands, And then when I lift up, I want to bring the left foot back and then alternate bending through the knees. Okay, so get a feel of softening at the knee angle, but really stretching back through the foot. Okay, so if you can feel your calves and you can feel the hamstrings, maybe you feel more of one than the other each time you kind of pedal through. But take the time here. If you decide to move down to your elbows for this, you can put the elbows down, hands hold each other, and then lift back up and still work with this circulation dynamic of bending the knees. Kind of play with that. Okay. So let's start to meet back on down to the blanket. And I think for reasons of ease in your pelvis, you're going to move your bolster way away in front. Kind of easy to do that. And then the blanket set for me, this is too high for my hips. So you can either keep the two blankets if it's good for you, then use it. If not, just shed one. And then take the hands so that as you lower down your hips, I want your hands to turn out and find that degree of rotation that's kind of minimal. It's not going to be I turn the hands all the way to seal, but I kind of open them. And as I lean down to my hip stance, I want to try to work with lifting up the heart, right? Get in touch with your heart to move it up. And then lengthen. Breathe. Okay, now as you come back to a cat pose, you're going to have the hands turned back a little forward. So index finger points forward and round your back, chin to chest. Now reach your hips back. So more of a heart opener when the hands are starting to slide forward. And it's almost as if you're trying to get your heart to touch to the floor to really stretch the chest with the hands as apart, they're as wide as your mat, and maybe forehead down, right? Not squeezing the hips back to the heels though. It's not a complete tuck with the legs. Okay, now as you come up, I want you to basically advance to the point where you're moving to up dog straight from here. So you're going to keep the elbows bending, and then you'll move forward and then flow to lengthen the front body. So back to the up dog. So it was a fairly arm challenged routine there. So come back and bend your elbows a lot to get back here to that heart opener. Chest is down. You're trying to get your heart towards the floor. Okay, and then bend your elbows. Well, they have to bend here to come forward. And if it's a little shaky, that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to shake. So when I come back, I want to keep my elbows bending. And then I just simply lower them down and then flow back my hips. Now, not all of us are going to feel the exact same range of arm tone. But the last time you come forward, just be neutral with it for yourself. Kind of play with the flow of movement in the front zones. Okay, and then when you come back, I'm trying to keep this real simplified. The hands are going to walk back and about shoulder width apart, so it's a little closer. Bend your elbows, so it's more of a prayer pose. Your head lowers down, and then you lift up the knees, and then stretch back to dog pose. It's a rather short dog than what we started with a few moments ago, but I want you to try to find that expression of the heels, both reaching down even, and your spine lengthening, so now your arms go towards more straight. If that makes sense, more straight, arms more straight. Okay, lengthen through the arms, but the back could get a little bit kind of clumpy with its ability to be straight. So we're going to walk our hands back towards our feet and our feet towards our blanket. And then take a moment where you get your toes up on actually get as much of your foot on your blanket as you can with the heels on the back on the floor. So you stretch your calves and then aim down so that the ribs lower down towards the legs, and let this upper branches, right? Try to reach forward. They don't have to touch down anything at all. If they don't touch down, it's perfectly fine. And let your spine dangle. Let your head maybe nod side to side. The key is dangling spine. If the calves find this too much extra sense of awareness, then you slide your feet off the blanket and go without the blanket under your feet. So that's a choice. But I would encourage you to try to work your calves a little bit in balance with our patterns here. So let your crown lower down. And the hips are trying to lift up. Breathing slow. Now give it an extra few moments by moving your feet off the blanket back. And then as you launch your weight into that forward mode of your rib cage, okay, hands at the back of the legs. So they're going to hold either below the knees or all the way down towards the heel bones. But get a feel for the leg impact, like just connect to the leg energy here. Okay, does it feel like it's responding and releasing, or does it feel like they're tight? So, you know, the width of the feet will make that easier if you step them out wider. And also the flexibility of the back, right, will start to lead into this concentration of the pelvis back and then down, well, then eventually down to the legs, but that's the final frontier. So come back forward, walk on into your hands in front, and then lower down your knees. And then as you move your bolster, turn it back spine-wise right into your core and lower down onto it, but have your elbows real comfortable and not even trying to force a perfect Sphinx pose. Kind of just feel your elbows down. And when those bones touch down, do your ribs feel like they're kind of piled onto the bolster, or can you move your chest a little forward? And I want you to move from your spine to that position. So what I find challenging for some people, their neck gets too involved here. So remember when we were doing up dog and we were moving the ribs, it was, you know, a little bit more rib attentive in that version. Here, I want you to kind of get a feel for moving your ribs forward with your breath. Breathing slow. So all breath to get that movement. Now stay onto the bolster and put I think a blanket would be a little bit more cozy than a block, but if you don't have a blanket nearby, you can put a block under your forehead. That's fine too. But I'm going to just put a blanket because it's a little bit more mushable than a block under my forehead. So forehead goes onto the blanket. You can tell that the block has its benefits too because it keeps the height. Now I smush the blanket, it goes with my body weight, okay? And I want you to place your hands so that they're going to stretch back besides your bolster, so the palms are towards the ceiling. And if your forehead is dropping down and you're feeling your jaw push into the bolster, then make your blanket just a little bit more. So you might have to really play with this blanket support, huh? Okay. Now the key in locust pose, I'm just going to be turning my head so you don't have such a muffled sound for me, but I want you to have forehead down and your arms are going to be reaching back and up. And instead of you muscling your way in this pose, which requires a lot of back strength, but breathe your way into these little lifts. So inhale, feel the arms lifting and maybe the spine strengthening, the shoulder blades back and down. Exhale, lower your head back down. Take a break, breathe. Keep the arms active. And then inhale, lifting up. Maybe your head comes up, I hope, and your arms reach back. If you're a little tired, then you can keep your head down the whole time. Breathing, strengthening through the spine, all the way through the upper center of the blades. Lower down, and then take the hands down. And then once your hands are down, I want you to find Sphinx pose again. Elbows are forward, hands are relaxed, forehead down on the blanket entirely. Lift the right leg up, relax the foot, and then lower down, and then moving to the other leg, lifting the left leg up. You might get a feel of the tone through the whole leg. So I'm trying to encourage you to feel whole leg reaching without pointing the toes. I mean, the toes might actually angle, but I don't want you to make a harsh push. Lower down. We're going to take one on each side again. So feel that you're moving from the lift the leg, from the spine, the front of the leg, right? So the front of that hip bone, and lower, and other side. Balance out through the hips. Forehead down. Lower down. Good work. Okay. Slide the hands back. Now you're going to come up, dog, and then come back to table. And then we'll step the left foot to the top left corner and lower down the right thigh. Now you might need to get your bolster back to the top of that right thigh. If that's not enough support, you could take your blanket on top of your bolster, like so. And then the leg might meet the bolster. Okay, so I want you to meet the bolster with that right leg. Good. I mean, the left leg might touch some of it, but I imagine it's very little touch down. Your blocks could be under your hands if that feels better for you. Completely up to you. Now get a feel for the relaxation of the buttocks. That's important. And that's so you're working on the front tundra of the right leg. Now switch sides. So left foot back and right foot out and open. So I'm going to move my knee out to the side and adjust the left thigh on the bolster. Yeah, if you find that the blocks are helpful for you, they might be at their second setting next to your bolster. That might be the best option, to have them a little bit higher. So position those blocks so they're up to support into your hip. So you still have hip support, but you have a little bit more lift onto your arms. Get an inner thigh sensation. Breathing. And now as we steady, we're going to get to that second side, right? We got second side pigeon and that whole little seated series. So it'll be a little different stream of movement on this side. We'll keep it all the same stuff, but it'll feel like you're kind of a little, your muscle memory will be there, but your mental breakdown of it might be different this side. So when you come up with your blocks moving a little bit out, you're going to come back with the hip. I'm going to move my blankie so I'm a little bit easier to get here. And then turn the bolster across the mat. Walk the right foot toe heel to the left. And then come down to that right leg pigeon. Okay, get a feel of kind of pressing your weight into the bolster. Well, actually, maybe that's too much. You just want to let your body weight kind of lean in. So when my arms move down, I do like the blocks under my elbows on this one. Some will like to have the hands and make that pillow. And that can be very soothing too. Or you could use your other blanket under your forehead and have your elbows out and your hands together. But the circulation is kind of poised for the right hip. So center your attention there. This is the kind of the gift of practice, right? You're kind of achieving awareness in these different zones in the body, these different territories. So when you're in the zip code, right, the hip code, you know, part of that is using your body weight to benefit the circulation in the hip, but also back to the kidneys, right? And there's all these meridian zones that are working in pigeon pose. You know, lots of inner leg and outer strip of the leg focus point. So it's a pretty revitalizing pose. Breathing. Okay, now this side, we're going to go through the seated poses first. So we're going to shift into our right hip and then take that left leg out. So when you come up, remember last time we did like that Baddha Konasana first? So you might start with that just for a mere moment and just go, okay, my Baddha Konasana, my foot is a little forward, it's not jammed up to my bolster. And then I take my left leg out and I have my right, it's challenging to keep it a little forward, I have to admit. Got my block under my right leg, it's quite held up. And then as I add my sand to the right thigh, I want you to get that sand load pretty high up. And then as you add your belt under your left foot, make sure you got a pretty big loop. Bend the knee, slide the belt under the foot, reach it behind your left hip, hold it with your right hand, and then kind of get a feel. Now, one side is not, one size doesn't fit all, even on each side, but they're different too. So you might go, well, I feel like twisting first on this side versus leaning down. So this is what I feel like on this side, is to do this part first. The other side, it was not the same. But so I'm going to give you the complete freedom. Of course, you have that to go either the twist first and then leaning down, holding the belt. Or maybe you start holding the belt with the left hand first, leaning down. Give it some time, make sure your neck is comfortable. And then coming up, and left hand to the right leg, and find that right hand comfortably holding the belt and just holding your spine root. This is like your spine root right now where you're holding onto your belt for this pose. So you decide where you're holding onto the knee or the belt. Breathe. You know, if you're leaning now or you're sitting upright with a little turn, you're going to start to unwind to go forward. And then we'll simplify. We'll take the belt off that foot. And then as you cross that left foot in front of the right shin, right, you have to kind of start to move the legs closer to your center of gravity. So I'll move the block away from under the right leg or the ball, whatever you have. And then that might be traction for your hip, the inner right thigh as well. So try to stay with that zone of motion. If you need the left foot on the floor in front of you, keep that when you take your full twist. If you are comfortable to cross the left leg over the right, then you find your line center. Remember, the legs kind of broaden the back of the pelvis. Right arm to left leg, and then take the twist. Okay, so this time we don't have the two blankets behind, so that might be different for you. If that's too much to drop down to, you can always add a block or get your other blanket, but feel the movement through the shoulders just as well. So I'm trying to rotate my mid and lower body. My upper body's doing enough work. I don't need to spend more energy on spiraling through that part of my spine. But maybe doing a little bit less than you intend to do when you start the rotation. See if you can back off, maybe feel like you're in the very beginning stage, and then see if you can excel towards that rotation. Deep work. Inhaling slow and exhaling completely. And now we're going to take away that turn left. So you're going to come back in towards that center line. And then when we shift out this time, what I'm going to have us do is come to side sage with the right hip down. Okay, so this side that you just turned to is going to go lengthening, kind of, it's going to feel like a blend of a back bend and a side reach, right? That's kind of the two positions for the spine channel. So when you take off your sand, keep it real close because you'll just put it back up likely. And then as you uncross that left foot, see if you can do these things kind of like very senior style. Like you're not only maybe are, but you are graduating into these poses, you know, you're maturing. So when you slide down off of that bolster, you're gonna let that left leg be supported by the right foot, or you're gonna tuck them together. This is fine. And then get your other blankie. Just be very kind to the cycle of shifting. When you lengthen that left leg, this seems to be the challenging piece, is getting this left front leg. So this is why the bolster roll might be helpful for some of us to help pick up the hips. Will kind of get a little more boost with that, a little bit more height behind you. But when you lower down on top of that bolster that you have what you've chosen, so, you know, you can tell if I have a bolster that's a little higher, it will lift this up, right? And so it's a little easier for me to gain that circulation or that traction. So that's true. You could also add another towel to your bolster. It's just the bolster roll is significantly different than starting to add bulk to your flat bolster, because it's still a flat bolster that has a little bit more rectangular pattern, right? That's pretty much it. So add the sand to the left outer hip, and then start to go into your side sage. So my right arm is between the bolster and blankets, and then come in and let that upper arm, it needs something for me. I need a block under my left hand. It's not required, and for some people, we don't get the arm back in that position. It stays open or it rests. Okay, so try to kind of, in some ways, rest your case here a little bit, your body case. You want to find a position where your body weight is centered. Now I'm pivoting a little more on this side because I'm aiming my direction to talk to the screen, but you certainly are going to be on your side. Okay, your arm is going to reach either over any of these directions, any four directions they can go. But feel that reach of the left arm. Open overhead or close to the bolster. And then finally work with the experience of the ribs expanding and centering, just like we started with today. We had expanding and centering. I think we did, maybe we didn't do all that, but we are now at this point. Now I like this kind of flow pattern. I love to change them up, but keep them all in the what the movement intention is still all clear and obvious the choices that we're making right now. We have the left side open. So we're going to keep it with that left side when we shift onto our back in a moment. So just kind of notice the left, the kind of the rib head area, this whole like rib barrel expansion. I mean, of all the ribs you have, these are the ones, the parts that you point to for ribs. Like this, these are my ribs, not like collarbone, you don't point to as much. But you know, get a feel for the connection in your back. Okay. Now, when we come out, I want you to first get the sand away. That's the most important part. And then when you shift your left knee towards the right, you're going to roll to the right, carefully turn, and then stay with that kind of looking down pattern, and then move your bolster over by your right knee. Okay. Take a blanket and put it on top of the bolster, and then keep a blanket behind you, and then roll onto your back and place a ball between the knees. If you don't have a ball, get a block, that's fine. Take a moment here with your feet on the floor. You know, they're measured with the distance of an item between your knees. So it could be a certain range for you that's different. And then you might go ahead and get your hands towards the sides of the upper leg. And then you want to try to let that area, actually it's not flowing down because it kind of bunches up in this position, but you're trying to encourage the spine to traction down. So I want you to push down to your feet and then let your spine lengthen, or what you feel like your back flesh is lengthening. And then you're going to squeeze into the legs inwards. So squeeze. So you try to get some control in that back space. Okay. Hands besides your hips, so straight down by your hips. And then push down through your hands. I know the elbows might kind of peel up a bit, but let your hands push. And then push down. I know you push downwards towards your feet, but I want you to actually push down to the floor, straight to the earth. And then knees towards the chest. Okay. Keep that compact position, that tucked position. This is key. This is all kind of coming full circle from the beginning, but we would have to rewind this and see if it really did. Okay, so feel the knees drawing in, that squeeze, that tuck. Okay, and then make small circles just along the edge of the sacrum. Just circling. Go both directions, be fair. Be spine fair. Sacrum round to sacrum round. And then take the ball out and the block and stretch the right leg down and cross the left leg to the bolster. Okay. So it may be a little higher than you're used to with the blanket, but use that today. If you want to use the ball to the sacrum, you can gently tuck it in so it's at the sacrum area. And then add your sand if you like on the outer left leg. It's only if you want to add it. No requirement. You know, sometimes that feels really helpful to have that grounding sensation of the sand, traction. So you might surprise yourself and find that it feels better in the middle of the leg. Maybe it feels really good towards the knee. The left arm is open. Okay, or it stretches back. Yeah, kind of enjoy the range of movement. The right knee bending, the lower leg, right, that's close to the bolster already. You want to keep that in kind of a little bit of a hinge help. And then all the little hinges, all the bendings are kind of helping support that little bit of length in your back. So not keeping things rigid, but a little bit of the contour and the softening. So head can be centered or turned to the left, you choose. And breathing. ribs, awareness, letting go. Now, as we feel that turn from the hip waist, right? So it's like the waist has been quite involved with the rotations. It's such a full body sequence that it might be all kind of going in the same cycle right now for you, but get a feel that now you've gone kind of that lower layer of your twist, right? The lower ledge of the hip. So I want us to take ultra good care of the lower zone. So when we go into this next bridge pose, I want you to let your body move any of those props that are on you or attached to your side. And you'll move into your knees tucked into your chest. That kind of releases the back even. And then when you bring your knees into tuck, can you reach down to your shins? It doesn't have to be really low at the ankle brace, but just kind of notice when you touch to that space, does that affect your knees? Just even if it does a little bit, just be honest. So if it does, then you bring your hands higher. It doesn't, it's important that you're not tightening around your knee here. It's not feeling force. And everyone's different with the range of motion and response in the nervous system. So now when we let the hands, basically you kind of know they're tucked in. So you know this is the proximity of the foot to the buttock. So that's going to change you. So if you bring your feet down, well, that changes me. I'm doing that every day. If you bring your feet down, I don't want to slide them too close into my rear, but for this one today, I want you to have them as close in as you comfortably can for your knee joint. That's different for everybody. So you'll find out when you get your hips to lift, isn't that true? So you'll push down into your heels, like you have loaded heels. Load your heels with little sand weights, okay? And then the toes lift up, and then you'll lift up out of your heels. And then you'll lift your hips. I know your feet are on the floor, not your toes can't stay up the whole time. Lift up your hip fronts, and then move your shoulders back. You can get rid of your blanket if it's bothering you right now. Sometimes it is actually a bother for that. And then keep the hip fronts lifting and just stay with this energy of the front of the legs kind of sizzling, right? And then the elbows are close in by the sides, tuck them in. Don't get too specific about it, but focus on the front of the hip bones. And then lift your heels. That's different. Roll the feet down, arms overhead. That might get you a little slippery in the top of the spine, but arms overhead, and then lower the spine. Arms are going to go forward to the thighs, and then inhale back, lifting the hips, bridge flow, arms overhead. Exhale, lower the spine. That feels pretty soothing. Now try to move through the spine to get your hips to lift. And then even more importantly, when you lower your spine down, smooth down the spinal column. Okay, now bring your knees to your chest. And then we're going to move our bolster to the left side. So feel a pretty strong tuck of the knees in. Maybe move your blanket back under your head. And then if this bolster setup is too much for you to push over, you might have to do a little bit of a tussling game with your bolster to get it to the left. But we'll go right to this one. So the left foot reaches down, and then you cross the right leg over. So keep it simple. If you need to scoot your body away from the bolster to the right, then do the crossing, go for it. So I want you to try to get smooth through the hip, add the ball, add the sand, reach your ribs open to the sky. Okay, and so that bridge pose that we were in a moment ago, I think after doing some of the work we've done today, it might be a little bit confusing, like doesn't feel like your spine gets each of its vertebral points down. So, work with it right now. We'll do it one more time before the very last pose. So give yourself the time to get all the rib motions interactive here. So the right arm is open, your head rolls to the right, and then come into this crossover. Yes, soothing through the ribs with the breath. Your left hand could be on your ribs, it could be on that sandbag, it could be kind of anywhere that you feel casual with it. Casual practice is what this is entering into now, the casual state. That could be the name of this practice today, casual state. Okay, now the knees are both bending. I'm assuming your lower leg started to get a little more bendy, even if it did that in the beginning. So you could take the twist. So bending the legs is fundamentally a part of life, right? You're gonna have to bend the knees. So it's like what's behind that bend, for me right now, it's the right side of my back. It's stretching up between my shoulder blades. Arms are open. Okay, now final frontier, we're going to move the props off of our shape, and that's important to think about it as the shape, that you can start to claim this bridge pattern before our last pose. So you're going to come off of the bolster, and you might move your bolster down away from your shape. And as my feet are stepping to about hips distance, I'm going to put a ball between the knees. You can put a block, either a ball or block. But now feel when you lift up your hips, these are really basic states of bridge pose, and then you lower down, that you're going through the spine, right, to get up and down. So it's a little different than cat-cow, but here we're going to bring the knees to the chest, towards the chest, they may not touch. And then I'm keeping my fingers tapped on the front of my hip bone. So when I lift up, I actually have, they're not really weighted, but I'm directing that traffic to angle it downstream when it lowers down. So it tips, reaching to my feet. And then when my knees draw in, I'm not really allowing them to pull up very high. So I'm trying to keep this about the same channel, lifting the hips, pushing into the feet. Lower the spine, move the knees in towards the chest. Inhale, lift the hips. It's really basic bridge work. It's not a bunch of arm work with it. Knees in towards the chest, spine length. Okay, this time bring your arms overhead right away as your feet plant, lift up your hips. Exhale, lower the spine. Ease into that traction of the back. Okay, bring your knees in, remove the ball, and we're going to roll up to sitting. Okay, take your bolster on a couple blocks. I want you to lift up your legs so they're completely up with the bolster blanket. Actually, it's already pretty much designed for this shape. So this is really traction out of bridge pose. So you're going to lift up the feet on top, scoot forward as close to the bolster bench as you can, and let the spine lower down. And then when you ease your back into this full length, can you add that sand to the rib cage, especially after that kind of interesting bridge patterns that we worked with. Maybe the sand can kind of center your whole rib back space. And then feeling like this is repair work, right? So we're going to have that sand support or any weight you might have to put onto your rib cage. Like you got a little bit of a vest on, you got your sand vest. And then as you lower your arms down, find where they're very casual, right? They're not like forced to be a certain state of position, but where you're comfortable with their presence underneath your shoulders downwards. Relax the feet, scan the awareness of the legs, whether the feet circle or they dangle, and lift up on the inhale that sandbag a little bit. So you're strengthening your diaphragm. And then on the exhale, feel the belly return back towards the floor. Feel the lift and lower of that core. Now with a slow, tranquil breath to return the mind and the body and let it merge in awareness of returning to the center. Feel the exhale lengthen. And that in-breath slow down. So any type of holding you have in your legs, see if you can let it go. Let the legs be entirely supported by your bolster. And you might be trying to move your knees or get ready to come up, but see if you can give a few more moments of surrender. Good. Now with the legs in that heavy, and that lift is heavy, right? You can feel the legs lifted, but they're also purposely releasing, even though they're lifting. Now we'll try to keep that when we begin the process of shifting. Take the sand away if you were using that. And then as you bring the legs to feet on the bolster, and then one leg at a time towards your chest. So you're kind of tucking and lifting. And the hands can reach the back of the legs. It seems like you need to do that. Like that's something to seal the position, but it's not required. You know, you might have your hands on the ground and just let your body rock a little side to side. But arms are functional, right? They make the position a little more functional when you have that connection. And it's interesting in general that this practice, you can use some parts more than others and just see what you are required to use to implement good alignment in general for your pose. So roll to the side and let your hands bring you up. And let's take a moment to connect in our collective in a individual way, each of us. So seated, cross-legged, give it a moment together, hands on the lap, let the shoulders roll. And then feeling what is inside, maybe centered, maybe anticipating, but connect right now to your hands up together in prayer at the heart and bow into this heart center. And surrendering in all of our hearts connected in practice. Take a deep breath in. Exhale slow. And bowing into your heart. And